I came across this video titled Why the Left Think They're Better. And it was kind of interesting because it's one of those titles where he gets to criticize the left and at the same time portray himself as a victim. Anyway, the video starts out with him basically saying that when he was on the left, he had no morals and he would have done horrible things to people. And he seems to implicitly project that onto the left.
I'm an ex-Trotskyist. When I was a Trotskyist, of course, I had no morals at all, which was the whole point of it, that you sort of set out to do what you thought was right at the expense of anybody or anything that got in your way. And had I ever been in a position to do it, I would have done terrible things to my opponents on those grounds, because I believed so profoundly that I was right. And one of the reasons why I am now, oddly enough, in the same church as Chris Bryant is because I decided to put a stop to all that. I didn't think it was legitimate anymore to believe so strongly that I was right, that I could even think of treating people as I would have done had I successfully achieved the Bolshevik Revolution, which I sought so actively in the 1960s and 1970s.
One thing I do agree with him is that if you think you're very, very immoral, that can make you dangerous because you might think it's justified for you to do bad things to people.
So morality in politics seems to me to be dangerous.
However, at this point, he starts just throwing out a bunch of words, that are really, really vague, sound important, but he doesn't really get into the meat of any issue. So, and this does seem to be a conservative trait, just throw out a bunch of feel-good words and never get into any details, so you can't contradict someone if they don't propose a policy.
What politicians can do about morality is they can quite often push people into doing things they don't want to do, because they, the politicians, think those things are right, or they can stop people from doing things that they would otherwise like to do. And my great beef about this is that over the past 50 or 60 years, almost every piece of legislation, social or economic, has been designed to make it harder for people, unless they're very rich, to raise their own children, and particularly for women to stay at home and bring up the next generation rather than going out and being wage slaves.
See, that's what I mean. He doesn't mention a single policy, although I can think of one. How about you raise people's wages? That would make it easier.
I will say one other thing, that the left over that period have tended to take the view that simply by holding the opinions they have and being on the side of what they term progress, they are themselves moral. And that those who don't hold their views, which I don't, are themselves immoral. So I take, for example, the fact that I happen to think that capital punishment is sometimes justified in the case of heinous murder. Now, you can argue about this with me and you can disagree with me about it, and I will happily take you on. But the reaction of most self-described civilized persons in London to any suggestion of that kind is to recoil like a salted snail from me as a person, because I am so evil that I hold this view.
And here's where he contradicts himself, because if you're going to argue that thinking of yourself as really moral is dangerous, wouldn't the death penalty be an example of where morality is dangerous? Because if you think you're so moral, you have the authority to sentence someone to death. Isn't that what he's been arguing against? He's not consistent there. And of course, then he throws out the salted snail thing, using emotional language instead of, logic.
And this seems to me to be a major problem in public discourse. You cannot really debate against anybody who despises you. And I find that it's very difficult a lot of the time to actually hold debates, because very rapidly the rules of reason and logic and the presentation of fact in support of argument flies out of the window, and it becomes about who and what you are. And that seems to me to be a major problem with almost all modern political discourse. The left think they're right, and not merely that, they think they're better people.
And of course, finally, he does this whole thing. Oh, people get upset with me, so we can't have a debate. But this is what he's doing right now. He's having a debate while at the same time complaining that he can't have a debate. So that's the thing, It's not that I think conservatives are bad or anything. It's just I think they're not very logical. And, they just like to virtue signal and play the victim and then say, oh, poor me. people treat me like I'm the bad guy. Liberals think they're better. But doesn't he think he's better than liberals? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. But anyway, that's the video. Thank you. Have a nice day.